Hi, this is just a very short video on my use of cameras. I've had 3 or 4 viewers who've asked me to share my setup, etc. So there are 4 sections. One, the cameras that I use and their settings. The second is placement of the front and the rear camera. Thirdly, my usage out on the water. And then fourthly, this is a very short tip or two on editing, and I use the iMovie software. So firstly, cameras. So I use 2 GoPro 9s. And the only reason I've moved on from the 7, which I loved and were perfectly adequate for me, was that the 7 has got this removable door on it. And twice I've drowned cameras by failing to put that door back on. So for me, the 9, it's got a longer battery life, but that's about the only advantage as far as I'm concerned. It is also heavier, which is a disadvantage. Okay, settings. So those are the settings that I use, which is 2.7K at 60 frames a second. And the reason I use this is, number one, there's very little difference, particularly on either a laptop or a phone, between 2K and 4K. Very few people can pick up the difference. So you'll start seeing the difference in terms of visual clarity only on a large screen TV. So that's point 1. Point 2 is that 2K uses less battery, so I can do a miller's run with both cameras fully running for the full duration of the trip, from the slipway out to the rock and in, unless of course I do a whole lot of remounts and I have a longer trip than normal. And the third reason is that, and I think this is the case, I haven't researched it, is that on 2.7K you get 60 frames per second, which is fantastic for slow-mo, and I don't think that is offered on 4K. What I forgot to mention under settings is that I also use the Superview function. You'll see there it says 2.7K and then SV. You'll have to do a different YouTube search on how to elect the Superview option, but essentially what it does is that it gives you a wider field of view. So if you are the subject, you'll be further in the distance, and the reason I elect that is that surf skiing is all about perspective and being able to see the angles of the waves around you, and hence for me Superview is a better setting than is the standard setting. So mounting of the 2 cameras, my rear camera, I use this mounting system, which is designed for a surfboard. So one attaches both of those. One then has a leash that goes from there to, then I use this, I think it's called a J clip. You can get them either with this 1 centimeter elevation, or you can get them with no elevation at all. I use this one because it's easier to then fit in your screw and have access with a screwdriver. You'll see I use a screwdriver, and then I place my camera inside one of these, which for 2 reasons. One is that if you have a bad beach landing and you get thumped in the beach surf, or if your ski ends up rolling on the beach, this ends up protecting it. And then of course, if this shears and your leash fails, at least your camera is going to be floating, and I have my name and contact number on it. Okay. And then in terms of the angle, I have my camera mounted essentially at 90 degrees to the surface of the ski. I find that works best. My front camera, I have the infamous Snorkel mount that fits into your mouth, and you can see there that you can breathe through this hole here and these fins here. I mean, there is some restriction on your breathing, but I mean, you're not having the same degree of rapid breathing as you would if you were kind of sprinting. But the big downside, of course, is you get, certainly I get the heavy breathing that is then picked up by the microphone. Of course, you've got the option of fading that completely on editing. And the downside is that you then lose the sound of the surf and the wind. But the reason that I use this particular mount is that it's accessible. I can change angles, I can put it underwater, and then I have this leash between here and my life jacket, so I don't find it's necessary to use one of these. So camera usage, most of the time I use both my cameras, and the reason for that is essentially the more footage you capture, the more chance you've got of capturing something unusual. And just imagine if, heaven forbid, the rear of my ski is taken by a great white and I had only my front camera going. I mean, I would never forgive myself. So that's kind of reason number one, is you capture front and back. The reason why and if I was to use only one camera, then I would typically go for the front camera. And the reason for that is you can direction change with the front camera. You can put it underwater, you can film behind you, particularly with my mouth mounting. I mean, it's much more difficult to do that if you've got it mounted on a cap or on a helmet. The other reason why I use front and back camera is you'll be amazed at how light conditions can affect the front versus rear camera footage. I mean, because something to do with the angle. I mean, the rear camera is kind of flat and horizontal to the sea, whereas the front camera is either at the height of your mouth or the height of your head, so it's angled down, and the two cameras pick up very, very different sets of perspective and reflection of light. Recently I had a run where I almost discarded all of my front footage and didn't even think I was going to bother looking at my rear footage, because I didn't think I'd capture anything of significance. But in fact, the rear camera, because the sun was very low in the horizon, the rear camera accentuated the angle relative to the sea, and I ended up having quite a bit of footage. In fact, I think that one is called Bucking Bronco number 2 with Valentino Rossi. Yes, I nearly discarded all of that footage. Last item under usage is water dispersion from the lens. So I've tried a couple of products. I've tried saliva, which doesn't work for me, and I now use this product, See-Through by Winds, which is designed for motor windscreens. I find this works pretty well. You know, it's a 90% solution. I recently had to discard a whole lot of exciting front footage because I had a big water droplet that persisted in the middle of the front lens, but luckily the rear lens at that time had captured good footage. So I guess that's another reason for using two cameras. But it's not a perfect solution. It doesn't work all the time, but it does a pretty good job. But I do apply it each time. You need to clean the lens thoroughly and then apply this twice to let it dry in between coats, and then you give it a good buffing at the end. And section 4, the last short section, just on editing. So I use iMovie. I haven't tried using anything else. I don't go for fancy editing tricks. So for me, it suits my needs entirely. Just one important factor to bear in mind: if you are using iMovie and you want to have access to the high quality, high caliber processing dynamics of the 4K option, then, and you're not filming in 4K, because I film in 2.7K, you have to have a short clip in 4K which you insert first into the editing line. It has to be the first clip that you insert into the editing line. That then unlocks access to the 4K high caliber, high quality processing options when you are saving and transferring the file. It took me ages to find that out, just by accident.